Welcome to the first episode in our video series, how to make a compact bop kit, also often referred to as a jungle kit. My name's Magnus, I'm with CompactDrums.com and Wallopus Drum Wrap. This first episode is in regards to how to convert a 12-inch rack tom into a floor tom, which is a fairly simple project. So the first thing we got to do, of course, converting a rack tom into a floor tom, the only thing that involves is installing the floor tom leg brackets. So that's easy enough to do. We want to just determine where they're going to go. Since it's a 6-lug tom, it's pretty easy. We just want to get the centers between the lug lines. So I just mark like this and like this, the centers, by measuring between the holes, and that way I can mark myself a center line like that. And we need to do the same in all 3 sides where we're going to be placing our floor tom leg brackets. So far easy enough, right? Nothing to it. So yeah, this new video series is going to cover all the steps in making your own jungle kits or compact bop kits out of any regular normal drum kit. The advantage of that, of course, being that a regular normal drum kit can be picked up for $100, sometimes even pretty decent ones. Not saying like intermediate or pro level, but pretty decent starter level, with shell construction very similar to some of the compact kits on the market that costs a lot more than that. Next thing we got to do is, of course, we got to decide which is going to be top and which is going to be bottom. It doesn't really matter, so I'm just going to make this the bottom. We're going to decide how far down we want these. Because these toms are smaller, what I'm using here is a 12-inch tom, by the way. Most jungle kits or compact bop kits like the Ludwig Breakbeats or the Pearl Midtowns or any of those use 13-inch floor toms, but I always found that a 12-inch floor tom suits me better when it comes to tuning the intervals between the drums. I'm not sure why. There are some manufacturers that do use 12-inch floor toms, but I do that more often than 13, even though I make them with 13-inch floor toms too sometimes. Because it's a shorter one, we want this fairly low down so that the legs have, even if the legs aren't really long, I have really long legs for this one, but in case they're not really long, you want this fairly low down so that you can get it to get high up enough that it's at the same height as your snare drum. So I always put these fairly low down, so I'm going to want it probably just around here, maybe just a little above the lugs because it'll just look more visually pleasing, somewhere around there. We'll just call it there. And then, so I just marked where the bottom hole would go, and then I simply measure, so that's 6 centimeters. And the distance between the 2 holes in the floor tom brackets that I'm using is not really dividable by anything standard. It's okay, 3.5 centimeters that mark. And that way we've marked our 2 holes. We just got to go around the shell and do the same. So I think the reason it's often referred to as a jungle kit is that one of the first jungle kits on the market was the Sonor. Oh, look at that. It ends up being exactly where there is an existing hole for the old mounting bracket. That was just pure luck. I didn't do that on purpose. I should have started there actually, seeing that it was in the vicinity and used that as the starting point, but I got lucky there. Yeah, Sonor back in the day had a kit called the Sonor Select Force Jungle, and I think they still do. And I think that's how the term jungle kit was coined, but I believe these days that's a little bit higher end in the jungle kit segment. I believe these days the big sellers are the Ludwig Breakbeats, the Pearl Midtown, and maybe the Sonar Safari, and most of them we've already reviewed on CompactDrums.com. This one, I think I take most of the inspiration on this one from the Pearl Midtowns, and it's simply because when I reviewed the Pearl Midtowns, that's one of the ones I was mostly impressed with. So this is going to lean heavily towards how those were made. So next step, we're going to drill these holes. To drill the holes, you need a brad point drill bit. That's the same size as the posts, screw posts on the lugs. And the reason you need a brad point drill bit is A, it makes it a lot easier to line it up and make sure that you drill in the exact right spot. What is really most important, as you're drilling down, you feel with a finger on the inside of the shell when the point of the brad point drill bit makes it through the shell. Ideally at that point, you shift, you put your drill inside the shell and drill from the inside out. I can't do that with this drill because it's too large, but if you have a small enough drill, that'll ensure that you don't get any ply breakthrough on the back side. Unfortunately, I don't have that option, so I'm just going to go really nice and slow and hope for the best. So the way to do that is you go with a little bit higher speed than a speed that you get the most traction with the drill in the wood, and use very little pressure as you're approaching the point of coming through the end. Very little pressure. You just want to work the drill through that last ply of wood, not push it through, because if you do, you're going to get breakout at the finished ply. We can take our time. And voila, not bad, no breakout. See? So I drilled the holes for the leg brackets, and as you can tell, I drilled some other holes too, because the lugs that I'm going to be using aren't the same hole spacing as the lugs that were on this shell to begin with, so I had to drill some extra little lug holes there. With all that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and wrap this shell. The wrap we're doing with this one is a Tomo ash with a turquoise aqua kind of burst. I got inspired to make this wrap. I had a customer recently who wanted a Tomo ash with a red fade just from one side to the next, and it looked so lovely when I was doing it that I figured, you know what, the next kit I'm doing myself, I'm going to do a Tomo ash. But I've always had my eyes on this finish, the Tomo ash with this turquoisey aqua kind of burst, so I decided, okay, it's time I do myself one of those. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and wrap it. First we're going to determine where to put the seam so that it faces the drummer, not the audience. Right here is where I'm going to be putting it. I've already trimmed the length and the depth of the wrap, and I've put a strip of double-sided tape along the edge here. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the wrapping itself in this video. If you haven't done any wrapping before or watched my other videos, then take a look on this channel and you will find a couple of videos that just focus on how to do the wrapping. As well as on Wallapus, the Wallapus website, wallapus.com. There's some very detailed instructions, both in video form and in written with illustrations form, on both methods of wrapping, both this simple method of wrapping with just double-sided tape at the seam, or fully bonded to the shell with contact cement. And we've developed a very, very foolproof way of doing the fully bonded with contact cement wrap. that if you want to do fully bonded, you definitely want to check out those instructions, because they do take the scary part out of wrapping with contact cement. And the scary part being that when contact cement makes contact, that's the point of no return. It's made contact. It isn't going to let go again. So for now, we're just going to wrap this up like this. I go around the shell a couple of times just to make sure it's not loose anywhere, but it's nice and tightly wound. This is the method I almost always use. Sometimes I do the full adhesion with contact cement. I have to say, I know a lot of people say that they can hear the difference. They've got more sensitive ears than me, because I don't hear any difference if I wrap like this or if I wrap with contact cement. And there are some really interested people that are actually done blind tests, and their conclusion is the same. You can't really hear any difference. Some people might. Maybe a studio technician can bring out a difference in the mix and in the mastering, but yeah, that's fine. And there we have it. That's that. The one thing I do want to talk about is making the holes. The ideal way of making the holes in the wrap is to simply drill them out from the inside with a drill bit the exact same size as the holes in the wood shell. I already showed you guys my drill won't fit inside this shell, so I'm going to do it the scary way. I take an X-Acto knife like this, I poke a couple of little holes using the existing holes as guides, like that, and then I turn over to this side and kind of whittle. Now you've got to be careful when you do this, because it takes a bit of pressure to force the blade through the wrap, and of course that means that if you slip, it's a pretty good chance there's going to be blood. So this is to be avoided, but either way you want to make sure that the hole you make in the wrap is at least the size as the hole in the wood, because otherwise you're going to end up with your lug post pushing against the wrap when you tension up the tension rods, and you get a big ugly bulge when you do that. And then of course when we've made our holes, we can go ahead and install the hardware. It starts to get exciting because you're starting to see the drum come together, turn from being parts to actually being a drum. I usually try to tweak this up towards the bearing edge when I do this. That's not really necessary, because to be honest with you, no matter how hard you tighten these screws, if it's not all the way up to the edge of the hole, it'll go there when you tension up the head. One thing I want to mention is don't tighten these too hard. If you tighten these too hard, you stand a very big chance of stripping the threads in the screw posts of the lugs, and sometimes even tearing the screw post right off. I've seen both happen, and it's really not necessary to tighten them all that hard, because it doesn't matter how hard you tighten them, if they're not all the way pushing against the hole in the shell, it's going to move upward when you tighten the tension rod, no matter how hard you tighten those screws. Well folks, here's the finished floor tom after I finished putting the hardware on it, and also the little rack tom. The rack tom, of course, is just a re-wrap tom. I didn't have to do any converting of that one, but we just went through the conversion of 12-inch rack tom into a floor tom. Next episode, we're going to get started on converting a 16-inch floor tom into a bass drum. I promise that'll be probably more interesting than this episode. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and I look forward to seeing you for the next episode.